the ocean of memories, an endless horizon where time takes a back seat and all aboard becomes a way of life. Here is a nostalgic tour of the 1950s British railway system for those who seek solace in the rhythm of the rails. Picture this. It's the 1950s. Britain is adorned in post-war austerity, but amidst the gray, there's a glimmer of hope and a spirit of adventure. And where better a place to find it than on the railways? The railways, the lifeline of a nation, the arteries pumping life and livelihood into the heart of Britain. Your journey begins with the iconic image of steam billowing against a backdrop of a misty dawn. Can you smell the coal smoke yet? Feel the warmth it brings, not just to your skin, but to the cockles of your heart. For here, every station, every platform, every carriage tells a tale as old as time. The whistle blows, echoing through the valleys and over the hills. A sound that stirs the soul and awakens the spirit of adventure. It's a melody of steel and dreams. Listen closely. Can you hear the porters rushing to and fro? Their whistles blending with the rhythmic chug of the engine. They are the conductors of this symphony of sound, ensuring that every note resonates with precision and grace. Then there are the newspaper boys with their melodic cries cutting through the morning air. Their voices are the percussion of this grand orchestra, keeping time with the relentless clackety-clack of the wheels on the tracks. Oh yes, the wheels, those tireless steeds of iron, carrying their precious cargo of hopes and dreams across the vast landscape of Britain. With every revolution, they spin a story of resilience and tenacity, their steel bodies enduring the test of time and distance. But it's not just about the journey, my friend. It's also about the destination. Each station is a hub of activity, a melting pot of lives intersecting, stories unfolding. Can you see them, the passengers? Their faces a kaleidoscope of emotions. Their journeys a testament to the universality of the human experience. Some travel for work, their faces etched with the seriousness of their purpose. Others journey for leisure, their smiles as bright as the polished brass on the engine's front. And then there are those who travel for love or duty or simply the joy of the journey itself. All aboard. And as the train pulls away from the station, a wave of emotion washes over you. There's the lurching forward, the sudden jolt that sends shivers down your spine, the familiar creak and groan of the carriages as they sway from side to side, a lullaby of sorts, a song of steel and motion. Oh, the carriages, each one a microcosm of society, a stage where the drama of life unfolds. Inside, the air is thick with anticipation. With the murmur of conversations and the rustle of newspapers, can you imagine yourself sipping tea from a chip cup? The steam warming your hands as you gaze out of the window at the world rushing by. Or perhaps you're lost in a book, its pages filled with tales of adventure that mirror your own journey through life. But the true magic of this era lies in the unexpected, in the serendipity of it all, the chance encounter with a stranger that leads to a deep conversation, the sudden burst of laughter echoing through the carriage, the shared experience of awe when a beautiful landscape unfolds before your eyes. All aboard. Now look up, my friend, for there's more to this journey than meets the eye. Above the train, high in his wooden box, sits the signalman, a silent conductor of the railway's fate, his every move precise, his every decision crucial. He is the guardian of the tracks, ensuring the safety of those who travel on the iron rails. And then, just as suddenly, it's over. The train slows, the carriages groaning in unison, the wheels screeching to a halt. The doors slide open, you step out onto the platform, your journey at an end. But the memories, the memories remain, seared into the chambers of your heart. All aboard, a journey through time, a tribute to the golden age of British railways. All aboard. So you have an abiding interest in railways, but which era captures your imagination? For me, it has to be the 1950s, a decade when Britain was slowly rebuilding after the devastation of the Second World War. The railways were the lifeline of the nation, connecting villages to towns, workers to factories, families to seaside holidays, and soldiers returning home. But what life was really like on Britain's railways during this era? Let me tell you. By 1948, all major rail companies had been nationalized into one great system, British Railways. At every station, large or small, the heart of Britain beat in rhythm with the trains. Picture it, a foggy London morning at Euston Station. Thick white steam hangs low, mingling with the breath of passengers. Porters hurry along the platform, their wooden trolleys piled high with trunks and suitcases. Families hug their loved ones goodbye. Children press their noses to carriage windows, their breath fogging the glass. The station master, dressed smartly in his peak cap, carries the air of authority. He blows his silver whistle, a shrill cry that cuts through the air. It's a sound that echoes the bustle and industry of an age gone by, a reminder of a time when train travel was not just a mode of transport, but an experience. The clacking of the departure board, the rumble of carriages being shunted into place, and the station master's final shout of "Mind the gap," these were the sounds that marked the start of a journey. They were the soundtrack of a bygone era, a time when steam trains ruled the rails and the romance of travel was alive and well. As the engine pulls away from the station, it gathers speed, the rhythm of the wheels on the tracks a steady beat. Inside the carriages, passengers settle in. Some read newspapers, others lost in thought. There's a sense of community here, a shared experience that transcends social boundaries. The guard in his smart blue uniform makes his way through the carriages, punching tickets and chatting with passengers. He's not just a railway employee, he's a friendly face, a link to the outside world for those on board. At the heart of the railway network, hidden from the view of most passengers, was the signal box. Here, the signalman held the key to safety. From his tall wooden box, often standing near the tracks like a watchtower, he controlled the flow of trains with a forest of levers. With a flick of his wrist, he could send a locomotive on its way, guiding it safely along the tracks. In the quiet moments between actions, the only sound was the ticking of the clock, a constant reminder of the responsibility that rested on his shoulders. Every decision he made could mean the difference between safety and disaster, and so he worked with precision and care, ensuring that every train passed without incident. He was the unseen hero of the railways, the man who kept the wheels turning and the passengers safe. But the job of a signalman was not just about following rules and procedures. It was also about being adaptable and quick thinking. For example, imagine a sudden downpour. The signalman would have to account for the slippery rails, adjusting the signals accordingly to ensure the safety of the trains, or perhaps a fallen tree on the tracks. In such emergencies, the signalman's calm and clear voice would be heard as he communicated with the drivers, guiding them to safety. These were not just hypothetical scenarios. They were part of the daily reality of a signalman's work. The railways were a living, breathing entity, responding to the demands and challenges of the natural world and human error alike. And the signalman was at the heart of it all, ensuring that every journey, whether delayed or disrupted, ended safely. The 1950s were a pivotal time for British railways. The post-war austerity was slowly giving way to a new era of optimism and growth, and the railways were at the forefront of this change. New engines were being introduced, old carriages were being refurbished, and stations were being modernized. There was a sense of pride in the work that was being done, a determination to rebuild and move forward. But beyond the statistics and the modernization efforts, there was a story of resilience, of people coming together to keep the nation moving. It was a story that was often untold, a story that deserved to be remembered. The signalmen, the porters, the station masters, the guards and the drivers, they were all part of a team that kept the wheels turning and the passengers safe. They were the unsung heroes of the railways, and their story was an integral part of the social fabric of the 1950s. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe for more. We have lots of other fascinating stories about the railways and other topics from history's golden age. All the best and see you soon. Have you ever wondered what it was like to travel by train in the 1950s? Imagine a time when steam engines roared across the land, their power and majesty captivating all who witnessed them. Join us as we take a journey back in time to the 1950s and explore what it was really like to travel by train during that era. The 1950s were a pivotal time in the history of rail travel. The steam locomotive, a symbol of raw power and romance, was the dominant force on the railways. These giants of steel, painted in deep green or black, their polished brass shining in the sunlight, were the epitome of strength and grace. Trains like the Flying Scotsman or the Merchant Navy class thundered across the countryside at speeds that felt magical for their time. People gathered on bridges just to wave as these iron beasts stormed past, smoke trailing across fields like rolling clouds. The experience of riding on a steam train was unlike anything today's travelers have ever known. The sensation of the engine's power as it pulled the carriages along, the rhythmic chugging and the feeling of being transported through the picturesque landscapes were truly unforgettable. The steam engines were not just a means of transportation, but a spectacle of engineering brilliance. They belched smoke and sparks as they climbed hills, their massive wheels churning, their pistons pumping. The sound of the steam whistle echoed across the valleys, a haunting melody that signaled the train's arrival. The carriages of the 1950s were a blend of vintage charm and functionality. Wooden paneled walls, polished to a rich shine, contrasted with the worn leather seats that had borne the weight of countless travelers. The air inside the carriages was thick with the scent of old wood and the murmur of conversations. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the rails created a soothing melody that lulled many passengers into a state of relaxation. Each journey was filled with a sense of anticipation and nostalgia. As the train pulled into stations, people rushed aboard, their faces filled with excitement. The announcement of the train's arrival echoed through the platforms, creating a sense of urgency and anticipation. Luggage was tossed onto racks, tickets were checked, and then the doors slid shut, sealing the carriages in an atmosphere of mystery and intrigue. Once the train was underway, the atmosphere inside the carriages was a delightful mix of routine and romance. Businessmen unfolded their newspapers, their faces etched with the seriousness of their work. Mothers doted on their children, ensuring they were comfortable and entertained. A group of businessmen discussing deals, their voices echoing in the cavernous space. Children played with toy soldiers on the fold-down tables, their laughter echoing through the carriages. Elderly couples sipped tea poured from flasks, their wrinkled hands moving with practiced ease. There was a sense of community among the passengers, a shared experience that transcended social boundaries. For many, train travel in the 1950s was more than just a mode of transportation. It was part of their life story. Holiday journeys were among the most treasured. Every summer, trains filled with families carrying picnic baskets and buckets for sandcastles would head to the seaside towns, Brighton, Blackpool, Scarborough. The excitement began long before the sea was in sight. Children leaned out of the windows, something unimaginable today, waving handkerchiefs at strangers in passing fields. Mothers unpacked sandwiches, fathers smoked pipes, and the promise of salty air and crashing waves filled the carriage with joy. But behind the scenes, the railways of the 1950s were also about hard work and endurance. Firemen shoveled coal, endlessly to keep the furnaces roaring, their faces blackened by soot and sweat. Porters carried loads heavier than their own bodies, yet always found the strength to smile and wish passengers a safe journey. Even small rural stations, with just one platform and a waiting room warmed by a coal fire, depended on these unsung heroes. As the sun set over the horizon, casting long shadows across the tracks, the steam engines continued their relentless journey, carrying passengers to their destinations, weaving tales of adventure, a wonder that would be cherished for a lifetime. What are your thoughts about the 1950s? Do you have any personal experiences or family stories related to this era of train travel? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more historical tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. When we think of the 1950s, images of rationing and austerity often spring to mind. But while those hardships were very real, there was another side to Britain in the post-war era. A nation that was rebuilding itself was also changing rapidly. New towns sprang up, new industries took root, and new technologies transformed daily life. And yet, there was a beauty in the ordinary. The ticking of the station clock, the smell of polish on the wooden benches, the posters on the walls promising "See Britain by rail." All these details stitched together the daily fabric of British life. By the mid-1950s, British Railways was at its peak. Millions traveled every day, the network stretched like veins across the land, and the nation moved on the strength of steam. For many families, a railway journey was an adventure, and when the train pulled away from the station, a sense of freedom and excitement filled the carriage. People leaned out of the windows, waving to those left behind. Children pressed their faces against the glass, eager to spot the landmarks that their parents had described. Some journeys were long and arduous, but even then, there was camaraderie among the passengers. They shared newspapers, told stories and sang songs, and when the train finally arrived at its destination, everyone joined in the relief and the satisfaction of making it. Life on the railways in the 1950s was filled with dedication and discipline. Workers were the backbone of the system, and each role carried dignity. The signalman, often unseen by passengers, was trusted with life and death responsibility. From his tall wooden box, he managed a maze of signals and switches that controlled every train across his section of track. The rhythm of the railway demanded constant vigilance. He listened intently to the clicks and the whistles, knowing that the smallest mistake could have catastrophic consequences. His decisions determined whether trains sped forward or came to a halt, whether they passed each other safely or stayed on separate tracks. The signalman was a solitary figure, cut off from the bustle of the station. communicating with the outside world through a series of lights and sounds. His work was a test of concentration and nerve, and yet it was a vital cog in the machinery of transport. Then there were the porters, dressed in uniforms that often seemed too thin for the cold mornings. With leather straps across their shoulders, they hauled luggage heavier than themselves. It was hard, back-breaking work, but they performed it with a quiet pride. They knew that their strength and stamina kept the wheels of travel turning. They greeted passengers with a quiet politeness, regardless of their own weariness. They lifted trunks into carriages, piled up parcels, and checked in bicycles with a practiced eye. Their movements were efficient, born from years of experience. They were the porters, the backbone of the railway, the quiet heroes of the platform. Their hard work was seldom praised, yet without them, the station would lose its heartbeat. In the 1950s, before the days of electronic ticketing and online check-ins, the station was a hive of activity. There were the ticket collectors, the cloakroom attendants, the refreshment room staff, all playing their part in ensuring that every passenger had a comfortable journey. They dealt with the public every day, families on holiday, business people in a hurry, couples on a date, and each interaction was a chance to make a good impression. The 1950s was a time when politeness and good manners were highly valued, and the railway workers embodied this ideal. They were the face of the railway, and their conduct reflected not just on themselves, but on the entire industry. Whether it was the guard announcing the next station in a loud, clear voice, or the ticket collector punching tickets with a flourish, there was a certain theater to their work. It wasn't just about the job, it was about representing the best of British railways. As the decades passed, the railways faced challenges. New forms of transport emerged, and the romance of train travel faded for some. But those who worked on the railways in the 1950s knew that they were part of something special. They understood that the railway was more than just a means of transport. It was a community, a web of connections that bound the nation together. And as long as the trains ran on time and the passengers were happy, they knew that they were doing their part to keep the wheels of Britain moving. Picture a time when engines huffed and puffed, their wheels thundering on tracks, carrying people and goods across the land. This is the story of the 1950s railways in England, a time when train travel wasn't just a means of transport, it was an experience. The men who drove those engines were giants in their own right. The drivers wore their caps low over their eyes, their faces leathery and tanned from years of battling the heat and smoke. Beside them, the firemen stoked the fires, shoveling black coal into the roaring furnaces. Their arms ached, their lungs burned with smoke, but their pride never wavered. Guiding a locomotive across the countryside was more than a job for them. It was a calling, a test of skill and endurance. And then there were the passengers. On weekday mornings, the carriages would fill with businessmen carrying folded newspapers and briefcases, their faces grim as they planned their deals. Weekends brought families climbing aboard with picnic baskets and excited children fighting for the window seat. Students returned to college, soldiers visited home. Lovers met on platforms, their eyes shining with anticipation. The railway was a stage, and these were its many players, each with their own story. But what was the most common sight on these railways? It was the humble passenger train, chugging along, connecting towns and villages, carrying people to work, to play, to visit loved ones. Imagine sitting in a carriage, the air filled with the scent of oil and the rhythmic sway of the train. Outside, the English countryside unfolded, hedgerows blurring into a green tunnel. Quaint cottages gave way to bustling market towns, each stop adding a new face to the human tapestry. One of the most beautiful sights, though, was the country station. Picture this, a small platform nestled between hedgerows, a red brick waiting room with a glowing coal stove and posters on the wall urging, "See Britain by rail." Sometimes chickens would wander near the tracks and the station cat dozed on the ticket counter. Then, in the distance, the sound of a whistle, like a song, announcing the arrival of the 423 from Paddington. And then it appears, a black locomotive, puffing steam into the air as it slows to a gentle stop. Time seems to stand still, the only sound the hissing of steam and the murmur of arriving passengers. For the children of the 1950s, train journeys were pure magic. They pressed their noses against the glass, waved at farmers working in the fields, and shouted at passing cyclists. They collected discarded cardboard tickets, and some even took on the hobby of train spotting, recording engine numbers in little notebooks, a pastime that would later become a national craze. But how did these iron horses breathe life into the countryside? What made the 1950s railways an integral part of everyday life? It was the people. It was the engine drivers and firemen who made the trains run, keeping the wheels turning and the fires burning. It was the passengers who filled the carriages, bringing life to the railway stations and making every journey a new adventure. It was the children who pressed their faces against the windows, dreaming of far-off lands, and the adults who stood on platforms waving goodbye, hoping for a safe arrival. In a world where progress was measured by innovation, the 1950s railways stood as a testament to human spirit, a rhythm of life that connected hearts and moved Britain forward, one train at a time. As the sun set over the English countryside, casting long shadows on the tracks, the sound of a distant whistle echoed through the quiet. It was the music of the 1950s railways, a melody of hard work, dedication, and a shared journey. A lullaby for the nation, ensuring that wherever you were in Britain, you were never truly alone. This is the story of the 1950s railways in England. And now I want to hear from you. What memories do you have of train travel in the 1950s? Did you collect train tickets? Did you wave at the engine driver? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more nostalgic adventures. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Yet the 1950s also brought challenges. Britain was changing rapidly. Cars and buses were becoming more common, and the once unquestioned dominance of the railways began to weaken. Diesel and electric trains were being tested, promising speed and efficiency, but lacking the romance of steam. Still, in this decade, the railways remained at the heart of national life. Holiday trains to the seaside were packed. Excursion tickets were sold for day trips to the countryside, and the railway still carried coal, mail, and goods that kept Britain alive. On Christmas Eve, trains ran late into the night, delivering families to their loved ones. On Remembrance Sundays, platforms grew silent as trains carried veterans to London. The railway was part of the nation's soul, and so when we remember the British railway journey of the 1950s, we are not just recalling engines and platforms. We are remembering a way of life, the dignity of station masters in polished shoes, the kindness of porters who carried luggage without complaint, the signalman watching from his high wooden box, the driver and fireman sweating inside the cab, the laughter of children on their way to the sea. One of the joys of riding on Britain's railways today is the variety of rolling stock available to us. We can travel in anything from a 1950s carriage hauled by a mighty steam engine to a modern high-speed train. But the 1950s brought huge change to the types of trains running around the country. The first diesel locomotive was introduced in 1951, and it was long before these became a common sight. But what about those iconic double-decker buses you see everywhere? Well, they were all the rage in the 1950s too. Did you know that over 2,500 were sold during this decade alone? The 1950s saw major advancements in the world of rail travel, with new innovations like the diesel hydraulic engine and English electric venture. Meanwhile, the humble push-pull train, which had been a staple of the railways since the 1920s, continued to evolve with improvements to its design. However, despite these advancements, there was still one type of engine that held a special place in the hearts of many railway enthusiasts: the trusty steam locomotive. For many people, steam engines were not just a means of transportation, but a symbol of nostalgia and tradition. They evoked a sense of romance and adventure that was hard to find in the modern world. In fact, the 1950s were the last decade in which steam locomotives played a significant role in the UK's transport system. By the end of the decade, over 1,600 steam engines had been built, with the last one built in 1960. But sadly, steam power was becoming increasingly outdated, and the number of steam engines in service declined rapidly during the 1960s. Today, only a handful remain in regular use. The 1950s was a time when Britain's railways were in transition, moving away from steam power towards more modern forms of traction. Yet despite the changes, one thing remained constant: the dedication and hard work of the railway staff. From the drivers and firemen to the porters and signalmen, these unsung heroes kept the trains running on time and ensured the safety of passengers. Their dedication and professionalism were essential to the smooth operation of the railways during a period of great change and uncertainty. And it is thanks to their efforts that we can continue to enjoy the rich history and heritage of Britain's railways today. Looking back at the 1950s, it's clear that this was a pivotal time for Britain's railways. While the romance of steam power faded into the past, new innovations promise a brighter future for rail travel. The introduction of diesel hydraulic engines and push-pull trains offered greater speed and efficiency, setting the stage for the high-speed trains of today. But perhaps most importantly, The spirit of innovation and progress that defined the 1950s continues to shape the railways in the 21st century. Just as those early diesel engines were once cutting-edge technology, so too are the advanced trains and signaling systems being developed and implemented today. The story of Britain's railways is one of constant evolution and change, and as we look to the future, we can be confident that the same spirit of progress that defined the 1950s will continue to drive the industry forward for generations to come. Every whistle, every puff of steam, every rattle of wheels across iron rails told a story. It was a story of connection, of community, of resilience in a country still healing from war. It was the story of Britain itself, even today. When we see a preserved steam train rushing through the countryside, our hearts leap back to that golden age. For in that moment, we are no longer just watching a machine. We are watching our history breathe again. The year is 1953. Queen Elizabeth, a new monarch, takes her place on the throne. A nation looks to the future with cautious optimism, and what better symbol of that than the coronation of a new queen and the railways that carry her people? But how will this young monarch fulfill the promise of her title? What challenges await her as she steps into the spotlight? And how will the ordinary people of Britain fare? As they go about their everyday lives, a young woman named Elizabeth has just taken the throne. Her coronation is a grand affair, watched by millions. People across the country are invited to celebrate the birth of a new Elizabethan era. There's hope for a brighter future, but also a sense of uncertainty. Will Elizabeth live up to the legacy of her family name? How will she handle the pressures of the crown? And what challenges will she face along the way? Join us as we bring the past to life and uncover the hidden stories that shaped our world. Every week we'll take you on a journey through time, exploring the events, people, and places that have shaped our world. From the steam trains of 1950s Britain to the glittering ballrooms of Versailles, each episode is a new adventure, a chance to learn and a reminder of all that we have been through and all that we have yet to come. Every like, every comment, every share helps us to keep these stories alive. So join our growing community of history lovers and let's explore the past together. Because as they say, those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. But we won't just be looking back, we'll also be looking forward. So if you're ready to step back in time and discover the secrets of our past, then hit that subscribe button and join us every week for a new journey through history. You won't regret it.